तो एक कॉन्टेक्स्ट हम समझ लेते हैं हम कहाँ पर आ गए। हमने जो बुक आजकल हम पढ़ रहे हैं इसका नाम है 168 आवर्स। इस बुक का सेंट्रल आइडिया ये है कि हम अपना टाइम, जो कि एक पर्टिकुलरली 1 वीक का टाइम है, 168 आवर्स कैसे यूज़ करते हैं, और यही सब कुछ डिसाइड करता है। तो पहला चैप्टर हमने पढ़ा था द मिथ ऑफ टाइम क्रंच, कि हमें ऐसा लगता है कि हमारे पास टाइम नहीं है, लेकिन जब हम टाइम लॉग रखना शुरू करते हैं तो हमें रियलाइज़ होता है कि टाइम तो हमारे पास काफ़ी है। सेकेंड चैप्टर फिर हमारा क्या था? एनीवन?
competencies
कोर कॉम्पिटेंसीज।
or competence.
तो उसमें हमने कुछ ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस के एग्जांपल्स के, कुछ इंडिविजुअल के एग्जांपल से देखा कि धीरे धीरे हमें अपना सारा टाइम वहाँ लगाना है जो हमारी कोर कॉम्पिटेंसीज है, क्योंकि वही सारी चीज़ हमें फ्लो स्टेट की तरफ ले जाएंगी। उसी में हम ज़्यादा अच्छे से कर भी सकते हैं परफॉर्म, और वो हमारे सेल्फ एक्चुअलाइजेशन का रास्ता भी है, वही हमारा इकिगाई है। मतलब इस तरह से काफ़ी सारी बातें उसमें आ जाती हैं। तो इसी कॉन्टेक्स्ट में बात आती है चैप्टर थर्ड की, व्हाट इज़ द राइट जॉब, क्योंकि हमारा मैक्सिमम वेकिंग टाइम जो है वो तो जॉब में ही जाता है। तो अगर हमारी जॉब राइट नहीं है तो फिर हम कैसे 168 आवर्स को मैनेज करेंगे? तो उसके बारे में आज समझते हैं जी।
नेहा जी पढ़िए आप प्लीज।
Okay, मैं पढ़ूं? The right job. The first time I interviewed the marine biologist Sylvia Earle in 1998, she was 5 miles off the coast of Florida and 60 feet underwater. I thank goodness, I thank goodness was not. There was a phone line installed into the Aquarius, an 860 square foot underwater base with bunk beds and an internet connection, from which Earl, explorer in residence at the National Geographic Society, could study the health of coral reefs off Key Largo and their inhabitants. There's a barracuda looking at me right now, she said as she stared out the window. We did a little inventory, and there are 50 species within 1,000 feet. She described silver tarpons, barjacks, and just clouds, curtains of small fish. They look like silver coins. 60 feet down, she and her colleagues were thrilled to learn that they could see the full moon the way the fish see the moon, with the dim light bewitching the coral until the reefs spawn and all heaven breaks loose underwater. It was a dazzling image, but what was more dazzling to me than 19 years old was the joy in Earl's brusque voice. She was 62. ब्रस्क हो गया हमारा आज का नया वर्ड. She was
हाँ, मैं
62.
ये सोच रहा था कि
That's
जैसे ये अच्छा आपने कहा, तो जो भी हम,
hmm,
जैसे कई बार लोग क्या करते हैं ना, जब भी लोग अपना इंग्लिश वोकैब इंप्रूव करने की कोशिश करते हैं तो वो वर्ड्स को विदाउट कॉन्टेक्स्ट समझने की, लर्न करने की, लिस्ट बनाने की कोशिश करते हैं, विच नेवर वर्क्स। हमें क्या करना है कि हम जो भी पढ़ रहे हैं, वट एवर वी कम अक्रॉस नेचुरली, कि अच्छा ये वर्ड किसी कॉन्टेक्स्ट में आया पर मुझे समझ नहीं आया क्या है, तो उसको हमें लेके, अब जैसे क्या कर सकते हैं, सपोज जैसे आज हमने रीडिंग किया, आज हमारे पास 5 वर्ड्स आए, तो नेक्स्ट 5 डेज का जो होमवर्क है वो हम एक दिन में भी कर सकते हैं। तो ये स्ट्रेटजी है।
correct. She was 62. That's currently the average retirement age in the United States. But even after 40 years of studying the oceans, 40 years of more than full time hours, hunting for projects, finding funding, grueling travel, battling over blatant sexism in the scientific community, and building a career while raising 3 children, Earl could not talk about her work without smiling. That affection comes through in Sea Change, the memoir she had written a few years before our conversation. When she was 3, she wrote, "A great wave on the New Jersey shore knocked her over. Ever after, she had been irresistibly drawn first to the cool green Atlantic Ocean, later to the Gulf of Mexico, warm and blue, serving as my backyard and playground through years of discovery, and thereafter to other oceans. The urge to submerge came on early and continues, seasoned and made."
कहाँ पे थे हम?
The urge to
हम्म,
submerge came on early and continues, seasoned and made more alluring by thousands of underwater hours. More than 7,000, not counting the shower, she told me when I tracked her down in 2009 to interview her for this book, each one heightening the excitement of the last. I found that affection intriguing as I pondered what to do with my life. Though Earl's primary message in the 1998 interview was about ocean conservation, there was a second missive hidden in her words like a barnacle clinging to a ship. If you choose your life's work well, something bewitching can happen through your labors. Each hour you log can be a source of joy. That message is the reason I'm including a chapter about the right job in this book. And as the first chapter in the work section, I realized that the connection to time management and productivity may not be obvious. As the folks and portfolio noted, when we hashed out chapter ideas, this is not a career guide. I am not going to ask you a series of questions and then tell you that based on your personality type, you would be a great accountant, or as one online quiz told me, either a novelist or veterinarian. I also can't tell you how to find and land the right job, though. Frankly, neither can some coaches who will charge you dearly for such wisdom. I attended one conference recently where a headhunter informed us that even in down market, companies hired people in sales, and a career consultant advised my breakout session that people often find their jobs through networking. There you go.
ये
That advice
प्रॉक्सिमिटी
cost you
प्रिंसिपल
nothing.
अप्लाई हो गया यहाँ, तो ऐसे हम इससे काफ़ी चीज़ें कनेक्ट कर सकते हैं। उसमें था ना एक फैक्ट था कि 85% पीपल फाइंड देयर जॉब्स थ्रू नेटवर्किंग।
नेटवर्किंग, हाँ हाँ, उसमें आपने बोला. There you go. That advice cost you nothing more than the sticker price on this book. Instead, I can say this. I am including a chapter on being in the right job because, in the context of overall life management, it matters that much. We spend a lot of our waking hours working. Generally, not the bulk, but a lot nonetheless. Like choosing the right spouse, being in the right job can give you amazing energy for the entirety of your 168 hours.
क्या एनालॉजी यूज़ करी है?
Mhm.
बिल्कुल।
You will certainly have more zeal for your work if you love what you do. When I spoke with her again in 2009, not only was Sylvia Earle at age 73 heading off for trips to the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico to study whale sharks and to Australia to study the reefs, she was finishing up a book called The World is Blue, had recently worked with Google to add oceans to the Google Earth database, was flying around the world to campaign for marine sanctuaries as part of winning the $100,000 TED Prize, and was involved in the operations of deep ocean exploration and research, a submarine consulting company she founded. So she was part of so many things at the age of 73. But here's the fascinating part. If you love what you do, you'll have more energy for the rest of your life too. If you're trying to build a career while raising a young family, you will have more energy for your children if you work 50 hours a week in a job you love than if you work 30 in a job you hate. Or at least you will come up with better art projects. Earl recalls that she often had her 3 kids make slides out of seaweed specimens. I also say that being in the right job matters, knowing that as I write this book, Tim Ferriss' The 4-Hour Work Week has been sitting on the business seller list for 2 years. Ferriss downplays the idea of dream jobs. As he writes, for most people, the perfect job is the one that takes the least time. The vast majority of people will never find a job that can be an unending source of fulfillment. So that is not the goal here. To free time and automate income is. मैंने इनफैक्ट ये शुरू की थी ये बुक जस्ट आई थिंक नॉट हाफ वे थ्रू येट,
हो
बट
जाएगी।
बहुत सारे इंट्रीगिंग क्वेश्चंस हैं इसमें
आपके बुक
which you-
प्रेजेंटेशन में आप इसे भी ऐड कर लेना। एक तो हो गई
Okay.
आपकी मिरेकल मॉर्निंग, नेक्स्ट
हम्म,
फिर हो गई द हाफ ये 4 आवर वर्क वीक।
पूरा work. पर ये खत्म नहीं किया मैं, मतलब आई वांट टू रीड इट फुली।
अब हो जाएगी, वो प्रेजेंटेशन के लिए हो जाएगी कैसे भी ना कैसे।
ठीक है. Clearly, he struck a chord. probably because many people aren't thrilled by their work. According to one late 2006 survey of 6,169 full-time workers conducted by Harris Interactive on behalf of CareerBuilder.com, 84% of respondents said they weren't in their dream jobs, though there's plenty of evidence that most people aren't miserable either. Perhaps some people are better off following the 4-hour workweek prescription of setting up automated online businesses and using their free time to pursue adventures. But on the whole, I think that all play and no work makes Jack as dull a boy as the other way round. There's evidence that most people agree with me. Despite the popularity of TV shows about the leisure class, such as The Real Housewives of New Jersey, the 2002 General Social Survey found that most people would continue to work in some fashion even if they didn't need to. There is much happiness to be gained by throwing yourself into a meaningful profession pursuit, be it building a company whose products make people's lives easier, making scientific discoveries no one else has thought of before, or composing symphonies. Okay. Indeed, if you are in the right job, like Earl, then getting to study the oceans for only 4 hours a week would seem downright torturous.
तो अच्छा
Okay.
अच्छा, जो भी जैसे पढ़ते पढ़ते आपके मन में कुछ भी आता है ना, कहीं से भी बात कनेक्ट हो रही है, तो वो करते रहना, वो बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है।
Okay.
तो उसी से एक तो फ्री फ्लो होता है थॉट्स का, और कनेक्शन भी बन जाते हैं, फिर वो बात समझ में सबको आ जाती है।
Hmm.
जी।
Okay. तो वो तो अभी जो 4 आवर वर्क वीक का भी पहले वाले पैराग्राफ में जो बात कर रही थी, अब इसमें लेकिन वो ये भी बोल रहे हैं कि अब इफ यू आर डूइंग समथिंग विच यू लव डूइंग, सो दैट इज अ मीन्स ऑफ क्रिएटिंग डिफरेंट बिजनेसेस, ऑटोमेटिंग योर सोर्स ऑफ इनकम एंड ऑल दैट। बट अगर ऐसा है कि अर्ल के जैसे शी इज डूइंग सो मेनी थिंग्स एंड शी लाइक्स, तो उसमें 4 आवर्स अ वीक इफ यू आर ओनली वर्किंग, इट मे बी टॉर्चरस द वे शी। I can't tell you what your dream job is, but I can tell you within our evolving labor market what the research on happiness and creativity says its characteristics would be. I can tell you that beyond sheer satisfaction, there is a business case for being in the right job that has implications for the rest of your 168 hours. I can tell you that the chances are minimal that someone else will create the perfect job for you. You will have to invest the hours to design it in an entrepreneurial fashion, whether you are working for someone else or for yourself.
ये वाला आइडिया हमने उसमें भी पढ़ा था, डिजाइन योर लाइफ बुक में,
Okay.
लाइफ डिजाइन। तो उसमें सारा आइडिया यही है कि पहले सोचते थे कि क्रिएटिंग अ राइट जॉब इज अ लीनियर वे। वो कह रहे हैं इट्स नॉट अ लीनियर वे, इट्स अ मैसी वे। मतलब आप जो भी कर रहे हैं वो कैसे जाके कुछ ना कुछ चीज़ें कनेक्ट होंगी। तो यू डिजाइन इट योरसेल्फ बेसिकली। या आई
और
कैन,
कोई पढ़ना चाहता है? और
ये
I'll
वाला
continue.
पैराग्राफ आप कर लीजिए जहाँ तक ये पॉसिबल तक।
Okay. I can also give you some questions to ask about your work that might help you figure out how close or how far you are from the right job. Because if you are far, then there is an even clearer link to the issue of time. Harsh harsh as this sounds, if you're not in the right job, a job that is moving you toward where you want to be in life, then you're wasting almost all the time you're spending at work. You can have efficient meetings, you can negotiate a great flex time schedule, but what's the point? You'll spend 40 hours a week doing something you don't like instead of 50. You may be doing good things with those 40 hours, such as supporting your family or improving society, but there are other socially beneficial, remunerative jobs out there. There is no bonus virtue gained by choosing one that doesn't make you happy. Better to build a life where you don't need to write off any time as an inevitable obligation. Wow. मतलब हम ऑब्लिगेटेड होके कुछ अपना समय बिता रहे हैं या किसी एक्टिविटी में या अपने एनीथिंग इन आवर डेली जो टाइम लॉग की बात करते हैं,
बिल्कुल
तो
बिल्कुल।
whatever
तो
we are entering, whatever we are
यस,
spending time in.
तो मैं जैसे जब भी डिस्कशन होता है तो मैं यही बोलता हूँ हमेशा कि मेरा क्राइटेरिया ये है कि मेरी लाइफ में इस समय शायद एक भी मिनट का कोई ऐसा टास्क नहीं है जिसमें मुझे ये कहना है कि आई हैव टू, कोई भी टास्क नहीं है किसी भी स्फीयर में, ना फैमिली ना जॉब, किसी भी चीज़ में नहीं है। इवन इन रिलेशनशिप्स, नो वेयर, कुछ भी नहीं। लेकिन जब हम जॉब में होते हैं या बहुत सारी ऐसी चीज़ों में होते हैं तो बहुत सारी चीज़ें हमें करनी पड़ती हैं। तो उससे फ्री होना धीरे धीरे वो एक हमारा प्रोग्रेसिव गोल होना चाहिए। जी।
Creating the right job, last line क्या था? Creating the right job is the first step to using the hours you do work in the most effective way possible.
जी, आप पढ़ना चाहेंगे प्रणवी जी?
Yeah. Hi, Rahul. Actually, I'm traveling, so there would be a little, my voice wouldn't be clear, and yeah, I can't read the letters also as of now. I just thought of listening to the conversation over here. So from tomorrow, I would be on a regular basis.
ओके
Day
ओके,
after tomorrow. Okay. Yeah. Thank
श्योर
you.
श्योर, थैंक यू, वेलकम। ठीक है, तो अभी हम कंटिन्यू करते हैं, आप मतलब आप पढ़ सकते हो।
Okay. What does the right job look like? For all the angst that work can inspire, the fact that we even get to ask what we would like to do with our lives, with the working chunk of our 168 hours, is an incredible luxury. Even a few generations ago, such questions weren't really part of the cultural conversation. I recently reviewed another book in which the author recounted his grandfather's 40 years of labor in a quarry. That wasn't a penal sentence. It was simply the job that was available to him at his level of skill and education that paid enough to support his children. So he reported to his shift for decades. Now we live in a country that has latitude to follow your dreams, Earl says. Not only does the Census Bureau report that 85% of Americans have high school diplomas, but nearly 3 in 10 Americans and over age 25 have finished college. Okay, वहां तो और भी कम है रेशियो. The economy is more varied, and so the abundance of choice facing young men and women can be paralyzing. Okay, sorry. And so the abundance of choice facing young men and women can be paralyzing. Looking out my window at the skyscrapers of Midtown Manhattan this morning, I see the headquarters of Pfizer, Citigroup, and the United Nations, all suggesting hundreds of professions, as well as the street level delis and dry cleaners. The police officers directing traffic around the Midtown Tunnel, maintenance guys checking the roof of the condo across the street, and the barge operator directing a giant vessel north on the East River. With so many lines of work, perhaps the surprising figure isn't that 84% of full time workers say they aren't in their dream jobs or that we change jobs relatively often. I serve on the Princeton University Alumni Council's Committee on Careers, and a recent informal survey of alumni approaching their 25th reunion found that about 72% had changed jobs 3 or more times since graduation, and 41% had changed jobs 5 or more times. Only 6.6% of people were in the same job they got after college or graduate school. Instead, the surprising figure is that the 2002 GSS, according to writings from the American Enterprise Institute president Arthur C. Brooks, found that 89% of adults who work more than 10 hours per week, are either very satisfied or somewhat satisfied with their jobs. In other words, while most people aren't in their dream jobs, they have managed to squeeze enough peaches at this economic farmers market to come up with something that's not wildly off the mark. Okay, so पहले वाली पैराग्राफ में तो ये समझ में आया कि पीपल हैव आर चेंजिंग जॉब्स फ्रीक्वेंटली. 84% जो फुल टाइम वर्कर्स हैं दे आर नॉट देयर इन देयर ड्रीम जॉब्स, और रिलेटिवली काफी फ्रीक्वेंटली जॉब चेंज होता है. And only 6.6%, मतलब very minuscule, less than 10%, have stayed in the same company when they have joined from college or graduate. So this chapter is mostly about optimization, about using what
मैं
social
एक मैंने
science research say.
कहीं मीम देखा था जोक जैसा,
Hmm.
जैसे आज से 30-40 साल पहले क्या होता था जैसे एक हीरो है, वो एंटर कर रहा है बड़ा खुश होके, माँ मेरी जॉब लग गई, उससे लेटर
हम्म।
आता था। अब उल्टा होता है, माँ मैं जॉब छोड़ आया। तो ऐसे कई सारे लोग बना रहे हैं यूट्यूब वगैरह पे भी, कि अब
यस
ज़्यादा
यस।
लोग पेरेंट्स से बोलते, अच्छा जॉब छोड़ा है, बहुत अच्छा हुआ, अब तू वर्क फ्रॉम होम कर या कुछ और कर, तू अपना ड्रीम
हाँ,
फॉलो कर।
करेक्ट।
इंटरेस्टिंग है।
आई रिमेम्बर व्हेन मेरी जो सेकेंड कंपनी में जब मैं थी, तो इट वाज ऑलमोस्ट मतलब 7-8 साल होने को आए हुए, मतलब 5 इयर्स या 6 इयर्स ही हुए थे, तभी लोगों ने पूछना शुरू कर दिया था कि अरे यू विल रिटायर फ्रॉम हियर क्या, यहीं पे रहने वाली हो क्या?
हम्म।
तो ऐसा माइंडसेट हो गया लोगों का।
एक इस
सो
कॉन्टेक्स्ट में एक मूवी भी है, तमाशा। आई डोंट नो
ओके
वेदर यू हैव सीन इट नॉट, लेकिन इट्स अ हाईली रिकमेंडेड मूवी।
ओके।
लाइफ पर्पस के बारे में बहुत ही बढ़िया, थॉट प्रोवोकिंग है।
Okay, so this chapter is mostly about optimization, about using what social science research says inspires the best performance to make the leap from a good job to the right job. The right job turns out to have a specific definition according to a 1997 California Management Review article called Motivating Creativity in Organizations by Teresa Annabelle. Motivating Creativity in Organizations. Okay. A Harvard Business School professor who studied this topic for decades. As she wrote, you should do what you love and you should love what you do. A graduation speech cliche, perhaps, but Anna Bille meant two related and research based ideas by this statement. First is you should do what you love means finding work that matches well with your expertise, your creative thinking skills, and your strongest intrinsic motivations. इंट्रिंसिक और एक्सट्रिंसिक वैल्यूज भी जो हमने पढ़ा था ना लॉस्ट कनेक्शन में। सो फर्स्ट इज कि हम वो काम करें जो हम पसंद करते हैं या वी लाइक और लव, फाइंडिंग वर्क दैट मैचेस वेल विथ योर एक्सपर्टीज, योर क्रिएटिव थिंकिंग स्किल्स एंड योर स्ट्रॉन्गेस्ट इंट्रिंसिक मोटिवेशन. Intrinsic motivation means liking the substance of the work for its own sake. The second part is you should love what you do, means finding a work environment that will allow you to retain that intrinsic motivation focus while supporting your exploration of new ideas. Okay. In other words, the right job leverages your core competencies, things you do best
जैसे
and
इसमें
enjoy.
मैं एग्जांपल देना चाहूँगा, क्योंकि थोड़ा कॉम्प्लिकेटेड हो जाएगा वरना सबके लिए।
You should
Please.
love what you do. Means finding a work environment that will allow you to retain that
कुछ कह रहे हैं अभिषेक जी आप?
नहीं भाई जी, पढ़ रहा था।
ओके ओके, ठीक है। तो जैसे मुझे लगता है कि मैंने जो भी जॉब किया है, उन उन जॉब्स ने मुझे बहुत हेल्प किया है इवन उन जॉब्स को छोड़ने में, क्योंकि उन सारी जॉब ने मेरे को ये अलाउ किया, एक्चुअली फाइंडिंग ए वर्क एनवायरनमेंट दैट विल अलाउ यू टू रिटेन योर इंट्रिंसिक मोटिवेशन फोकस, क्योंकि दैट वाज ऑल अबाउट बुक्स ओनली, रीडिंग 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 दिन रात, एक्सप्लोरेशन अबाउट बुक्स, एक्सप्लोरेशन अबाउट रिसर्चिंग द टॉपिक्स, सोशल साइंस, साइकोलॉजी, कुछ भी जो भी करो। तो दैट सपोर्टेड माई जर्नी ऑफ एक्सप्लोरेशन ऑफ न्यू आइडियाज़ इन अ वे। लेकिन हाँ, जो कुछ बातें थी जो मुझे नहीं पसंद थी, जो मैं और फ्रीडम चाहता था, तो फिर मैंने वो ले ली। लेकिन यस, इट हेल्प्स।
Someone else wants to read या फिर हम कंटिन्यू करें इसको?
मिलन जी, वुड यू लाइक टू कंटिन्यू यहाँ से? थोड़ा सा भी हम पढ़ लेते हैं, और 10 मिनट्स और पढ़ लेते हैं। इन अदर वर्ड्स,
Sorry, I'm in office.
अच्छा ऑफिस में भी हैं, और
Yeah,
फिर थोड़ा कॉन्टेक्स्ट भी मिसिंग होगा अभी, बिकॉज ही हैज़ ज्वाइन रिसेंटली।
yeah. But I will listen. Yeah, I'm in listening mode. Whenever possible, I will definitely join. Yeah, for reading as well.
श्योर। तो स्नेहा जी,
Yeah,
आप
thanks.
एक तो अभी थोड़ा सा 3 मिनट्स रिवाइज करा दें, मतलब क्या क्या हमने पढ़ा है, ताकि मिलन जी को भी समझ में आ जाए, और
Please. Yeah,
थोड़ा सा और हम पढ़ लेते हैं।
thank you.
अच्छा, तो इस बुक में हमने फर्स्ट चैप्टर समझा था मिथ ऑफ टाइम क्रंच, है ना? Second chapter was about core competencies, understanding. So the author has given examples of different people, how they are able to manage with their 168 hours in a week. And this chapter that we are reading is about the right job. है ना? तो the right job, as in she has given reference of how do you identify what the right job is for you. So इसमें अभी पहले वाला पैरा में मैंने ये समझाया है कि the job that you love and love what you do. So you do what you love and love what you do. तो ये it might sound cliche, but इसको further समझाया है उन्होंने with things that if you can scroll up a bit, Rahul. ये वाला, हाँ, यही वाला लास्ट वाला ये. So you should do what you love means finding work that matches well with your expertise, your creative thinking skills, and your strongest intrinsic motivation. और इसमें intrinsic motivation हो गया मतलब liking the substance of the work for whatever it is, for its own sake. And so दो चीजें बताई है कि दूसरी बात जो है you should love what you do means finding a work environment that will allow you to retain that intrinsic motivation. जो भी आपकी intrinsic motivation है, what you want to reach या how you are motivated, तो वो आपकी retain रहे, तो find that kind of a work environment that supports it.
इसके लिए मैं एक एग्जांपल और देना चाहूँगा कि यू शुड डू व्हाट यू लव. जिससे मे बी यू आर अवेयर ऑफ द व्लॉगर मैथिली ठाकुर. एनीवन नोज हर? मैथिली ठाकुर, कौन कौन जानते हैं?
Yes, a singer, right? Singer, right?
folk singer.
Awesome
Yes,
singer. Yeah.
awesome singer.
Absolutely.
Now मतलब we can say world famous singer.
Yes, absolutely.
लेकिन आप उनके हर व्लॉग देखो या आप उनका कोई भी देखो, शी इज हैप्पी ऑल द टाइम. मतलब शी इज एंजॉयिंग हर वर्क लाइक एनीथिंग. वो कितने खुशी से बताते हैं, आज हम यहाँ जाने वाले हैं, आज हम ये कितना करने वाले हैं, आज हम उनसे मिलेंगे, कितना मजा आएगा. तो ये है यू शुड डू व्हाट यू लव एक्चुअली. और एक ऐसे टाइम में जहाँ पे लोग किस किस तरह के करियर के बारे में सोचते हैं, करते भी हैं, ऐसे टाइम पे उन्होंने एक ऐसी चीज़ पे फोकस किया है जो बिल्कुल ही अनयूजुअल बात है, बिल्कुल अनयूजुअल है, लेकिन बस ऐसे ही है, वो डिज़ाइन किया उन्होंने. तो वही इसमें बात हो रही है, राइट जॉब. जी.
Okay. In other words, the right job leverages your core competencies, things you do best and enjoy, and meets certain working conditions, including autonomy and being challenged to the extent of your abilities. The first part, the importance of being intrinsically motivated, is backed up with several studies. For one of them, Annabelle and her colleagues asked a group of aspiring scribes to write poems, which would then be judged by writing experts. Before they could compose the poems, though, the writers answered questions about their motivations for entering the profession. Annabelle found that those who were asked about the pleasure they experienced in writing something they could be proud of, that is, who were intrinsically motivated, scored higher marks than those who were asked about wanting to be rich and famous, which are external motivations. That doesn't mean that there is anything wrong with wanting to be rich and famous. Just as there is nothing wrong with bosses coaxing better work from their employees with pizza, bonuses, and other adult equivalents of grade school gold stars. On some level, external rewards like paychecks are necessary in our capitalist society. It's just that the best work, the most meaningful work, comes from some other well of motivations. Or as the poet Annie Sexton once told her agent, I am in love with money, so don't be mistaken. But first, I want to write good poems.
Very interesting.
Nice one. Chances are you have seen that well of motivation somewhere in your life. Often, as with Sylvia Earle, speaking of oceans as her playground and backyard, it has to do with the activities you felt great affection for as a child. तो इस चैप्टर में हम सिल्विया अर्ल हैं जो ओशियन मतलब she has worked extensively, she has written book and worked in ocean as a submerged submarine में ना
Explorations, deep oceans.
एक्सप्लोर किया है, काफी किया है उन्होंने, तो उनके ऊपर ही है, तो उनका नाम फिर से आया है. It has to do with the activities you felt great affection for as a child. While fewer than 1 in 6 Americans told CareerBuilder.com that they were in their dream jobs, a full 35% of firefighters said they were the highest among any profession. Oh, they were in their dream jobs. A full 35% of firefighters said they were the highest among any professions. I am sure this has something to do with the fact that 41% of firefighters grew up wanting to be firefighters. तो वो बता रहे हैं कि careerbuilder.com में जो भी सर्वे हुआ उसके अकॉर्डिंगली ड्रीम जॉब्स में अभी तक जिन्होंने बोला जो सर्वे हुआ 35% इज द हाईएस्ट विच वाज इन द फायर फाइटर्स
Firefighter.
कैटेगरी. As you look over your list of 100 dreams, ये आपने कहीं पे लिखा था ना, लिस्ट ऑफ 100 ड्रीम्स.
हाँ, ये कल कल जो हमने पढ़ा था उसमें ये अच्छी एक्टिविटी थी और मुझे लगा ये एक अच्छी कोचिंग एक्टिविटी भी हो सकती है. ऑथर सजेस्टेड कि लिस्ट एनी 100 थिंग्स यू ऑलवेज वांटेड टू डू, और फिर आप उसे करने भी लग जाओ जो उसमें से पॉसिबल है. इन दिस प्रोसेस यू विल रियलाइज कि व्हाट यू एक्चुअली लव डूइंग. अदरवाइज कुछ चीज़ें हमारे ड्रीम में होती हैं लेकिन जब हम एक्चुअली करने जाते हैं फिर हमें लगता है नहीं इसमें तो मज़ा नहीं आ रहा. कई बार ऐसा होता है, जिस चीज़ के लिए बहुत वेट किया ये करेंगे फिर जाके किया या करने लगे, लगा अरे बस ये ऐसे ही था, मज़ा नहीं आया. तो वो एक इस तरह से सेल्फ डिस्कवरी की एक्टिविटी कह रहे हैं. तो इसका एक फॉर्मेट जैसा भी इन्होंने दिया था लास्ट पेजेस में कुछ, तो
Okay.
इट्स अ गुड एक्टिविटी.
Okay. Consider whether any involve ways you've played as a kid, ways that it consumed blissful hours when you didn't have to worry about making a living or impressing anyone with your job title. Writing has always been this activity for me. I wrote and illustrated my own books in kindergarten. When I was bored in high school, I wrote dozens of short stories at night. They weren't very good, which confused the issue because, from an objective standpoint, I seemed better at other subjects such as maths. But I never doodled differential equations in my notebooks for fun. Fortunately, I realized that before I became a middling and unhappy math professor. Fortunately, I realized that before I became a middling and unhappy math professor. I do, however, enjoy writing about math and science. For about a year, I wrote a weekly column for Scientific American's website called Where Are They Now? That profiled former finalists in the Westinghouse Science Talent Search. This competition started in 1942 and now called the Intel Science Talent Search. Identified 40 top high school scientists each year based on their independent research projects. As I studied these scientists' lives and careers, I found that inevitably those who spoke with the most awe of their jobs had indications of their intrinsic motivations when they were kids too. तो इनको लिखना बहुत पसंद है, but she said that math, but on the other side, she was very good in maths, which she never liked as much. I mean, she did not
Okay.
enjoy it as much.
इतना रह गया इसमें. ओके, काफ़ी है. तो वैसे अगर 10-15 मिनट्स हम दें तो हम यहाँ तक कर सकते हैं, लेकिन इफ़ यू हैव ए हार्ड स्टॉप तो वी कैन स्टॉप हियर एज वेल, वट एवर यू सजेस्ट. अदरवाइज 1:30 तक हो जाएगा.
ठीक है, कर सकते हैं. Ilan Crew, for instance, now an aeronautics professor at Stanford, grew up in rural Oregon in the 1960s. He spent his childhood dreaming of flying machines. Once he constructed a hang glider from bamboo poles, duct tape, and plastic. He and some friends took the contraption to a nearby dairy farm, ran down a hill, and got a few feet off the ground before crashing. Any landing that we could walk away from was a good landing, Crew told me. Fortunately, he survived that experiment, and in high school, with assistance from a research program at the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry in Portland, he decided to build a better wind tunnel to help him understand the aerodynamics of flight. One problem he saw with wind tunnels is that the object being tested requires a support structure to stay in place as air blasts around it. But these supports affect airflow and skew the data. To solve this problem, Crew built a wind tunnel lined with magnets. A photosensor monitored the test object and sent signals to change the strength of the magnet's field so they, rather than a support structure, could hold the object in place. This design won him a finalist spot in 1974 Westinghouse competition, and with such an honor under his belt, he never looked back. He earned his PhD in aeronautics and over the years has created many innovations used at Boeing and elsewhere, always with an eye to the practicalities of flying and often trying to do more with less. One particularly fascinating creation is a vehicle known as a foot-launched sailplane, now licensed to the Belgian company Airain as the Swift. Okay. It is in some ways a more elegant solution to the problem he tried to solve at that old dairy farm of how humans can fly without the bothersome hum of an engine. No one was paying him to ponder that question as a kid. He threw himself into the work simply because he wanted to. He loved the substance of the work for its own sake. And so, like Earl talking about her ocean playgrounds, when I asked Crew to describe flying the Swift, he spoke with joy in his voice. I probably can't do justice to that, he said. But flying at the speed of birds, totally quiet, looking down, seeing the mountain and desert floor 8,000 feet below you is unlike any other kind of flying. It is absolutely amazing. Of course, just because the stuff of your job, in Crew's case, planes and flying, leverages your core competencies, doesn't mean that the second part of Annabelle's test will be met. Not only do you have to do what you have to love what you do. That is, the job conditions need to be optimal to coax out your best work. अभी तक समझ में आ रहा है ना? या अगर स्पीड ज्यादा हो रही है तो बता सकते हैं.
देखो जो बात
तो अभी
में
दूसरे
करेंगे
हम
तो थोड़ा डिस्कनेक्ट तो
हाँ?
लगेगा. Those who
हाँ
are joining late.
हाँ तो अभी हम दूसरे इनका रेफरेंस है क्रू का, who as a kid how he started, he flew down the hill और फिर later on he got into aerodynamics और उन्होंने एक invent किया ये स्विफ्ट जो है which was sold to some country. क्या नाम था वो? तो of course तो वो अभी बता रहे हैं कि it is not just about not only do you have to do what you love, you have to love what you do. That is, the job conditions need to be optimal to coax out your best work. Crew's job as a professor gives him autonomy and the constant challenge of trying to break new ground with his research. While there are other jobs that could involve his core competencies, such as flying planes for the military, they might not necessarily fit the way he works best, though they might be great for someone who relishes the challenge of combat.
तो अभी
To
तक हम
study
ये
the
कह सकते हैं इसमें कि जैसे भले ही आपने जिसने भी लेट भी ज्वाइन किया है, राइट जॉब के लिए अभी तक 3 कीवर्ड्स हमें याद रखने हैं. व्हाट इज़ द राइट जॉब, या हमारी जॉब भी राइट जॉब है या नहीं. तो 3 क्वेश्चंस अपने आप से पूछ सकते हैं. एम आई लेवरेजिंग माई कोर कॉम्पिटेंसीज. दूसरा, डू आई हैव ऑटोनॉमी टू टेक डिसीजन, मेक डिसीजन अबाउट टाइम, अबाउट सो many other things. Third, do I have some kind of constant challenge in my job? It is challenging enough. तो ये 3 कीवर्ड्स भी हम याद रखें तो हमारा काम बन जाएगा फिलहाल.
Rahul, can you please repeat the second one? The first one is your like how far you are connected with your core
Second,
competencies.
first one is leveraging our core competencies.
Yeah,
Second is autonomy.
autonomy. Okay.
Autonomy about time, about taking decisions.
Okay.
And third is the constant challenge.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
तो ये 3 सिंपल कीवर्ड्स हैं. यस, ट्विस्ट. तो अभी
To
जिन्होंने
study
भी
the
अभी ज्वाइन
effect,
किया है, we will be reading for 7 more minutes and 1:30 we will start focus session. जी.
okay. To study the effect of job
Mansi ji,
conditions
saying
on
something?
work.
Sorry?
Are you saying something?
Yeah, I was about to ask what time you start at 12:30, right? Every day?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I just share the PDF with me, na, so even I would catch up and want to. Like, 12:30 is a difficult time for me, but I'll see whenever I can. Like,
Yeah,
I'll
all
also
the videos
read
are
options.
also, all the videos which we are reading are uploaded on YouTube as well.
Acha, हाँ, okay. Yeah, I can check that. Sure. Yeah.
I will share both. जी.
To study the effect of job conditions on work quality, Amabile and her colleagues conducted several other studies, such as one that examined the practices of a 30,000 employee corporation they called High-Tech Electronics International. They identified several high-tech electronics projects where innovation was the desired outcome and asked managers and workers to rate the projects in terms of whether the results actually had been creative or not. Then they asked about the presence or absence of several work conditions for all these projects. They found that the best results required three things: that people be given a great deal of freedom in figuring out how to carry out the work, that is, the opportunity to make day to day decisions in the project. This is the autonomy that you were saying. Second is that team members felt challenged in a positive fashion by the work. Third is that people felt they had sufficient organizational support, resources, a supportive work group, a supportive supervisor who communicated well, and an organizational environment where creativity was encouraged. So the first condition, autonomy, is straightforward. No one wants to be micromanaged. And if you are being paid for your ideas, as at least some of us are these days, there is no reason for someone else to dictate how to do the work, or even when and where you work. Indeed, there are good business reasons not to. According to meta-analysis of 46 studies published in the November 2007 Journal of Applied Psychology, telecommuting, usually meaning working from home on your own schedule, though it can mean working from anywhere you choose, is associated with higher supervisor performance ratings, increased job satisfaction, and a reduction in the intent to leave one's company. The growing proportion of self-employed Americans naturally works this way much of the time, which may be why self-employed people tend to have more job satisfaction than other workers.
ओके, इंटरेस्टिंग। मुझे इससे एक बात याद आ
Of-
गई ऑटोनॉमी से।
Hmm?
एक बात याद आ गई मुझे, करीब 6 साल पहले, 6-7 साल पहले। सो वी वर वर्किंग, तो पब्लिशिंग इंडस्ट्री में कंटेंट राइटिंग इज़ द मेन जॉब, है ना। एडिटिंग, कॉपी राइटिंग, ऐसे बहुत सारी प्रोफाइल्स होते हैं। तो अधिकतर लोग वहाँ क्या होता है ना, हमें क्रिएटिव आइडियाज़ पे काम करना होता है और सारा नॉइज़ हो रहा होता है, कोई बात कर रहे होते हैं, कोई साइंस की टीम है, कोई सोशल साइंस की टीम है, कोई मैथमेटिक्स की टीम है। तो फिर सभी लोग क्या करते हैं, वो लगा लेते हैं, हेडफोन लगा लेते हैं और अपना कोई म्यूज़िक सुनते रहते हैं, काम करते हैं। तो जो वहाँ के जो कंटेंट हेड थे पूरे इंडिया के, तो वो ऐसे कभी कभी आते थे और पता नहीं चलता था भाई, हमारे तो कानों में लगा रहता था। तो आके पूछते हैं, क्या क्या चल रहा है, ये क्या सुन रहे हो, मुझे भी सुनाओ। तो उन्होंने लगे वो सुनने लगे। कह रहे हैं, मेरे को समझ में ये नहीं आता आप लोग कैसे काम कर लेते हो। तो फिर उन्होंने सबको देखा तो सबके लगा हुआ था ऐसे। कह रहे कि मैं ही कुछ नहीं समझ पा रहा हूँ या आप लोग नहीं समझ पा रहे हो, ऐसे कैसे काम करते हो। फिर वो इतना बोल के कह रहे ठीक है, जैसे आपको करना है करो, चलता है। तो ये बात वही है ऑटोनॉमी की। अगर वो कह देते हैं कि नहीं ऐसे नहीं करना है, तो क्या होता है, जो क्रिएटिव प्रोसेस है ना, वो हॉल्ट हो जाता है। तो कहीं ना कहीं जो बहुत लिबरल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है वो तो फुल फ्रीडम देते हैं, वो तो समझते ही हैं। लेकिन हमारी जो कंपनी थी, मैं उसका नाम तो नहीं लूँगा, है तो बहुत बड़ी कंपनी, बहुत बड़ी। लेकिन वो अभी भी बहुत, क्योंकि वो बहुत पुरानी कंपनी है, तो वो भी वैसे ही तरीक़ों से चलते हैं जो 60-70-80 साल से चले आ रहे हैं। लेकिन यस, इट इज़ चेंजिंग ऑटोनॉमी थिंग। किसी को कुछ और ऐड करना है तो कर सकता है।
Okay. Of course, some work does need to be done at a certain time and place. Most second grade teachers still report to a classroom. Policemen report to their precincts. Even so, there is a big difference between having every action dictated and being held accountable for a result. For example, high test scores and having reasonable freedom to choose the means. There is not necessarily a right way to work, but there is a right way for you. Think about the times when you felt most creative and productive and try to identify the who, what, when, where, and why answers we reporters learn to cram into the first paragraph of a story. Were you working closely with other people or by yourself? What kind of work were you doing? So when we are reading this, maybe we can all just think about that. When what is the time you can go back to that time when you felt most creative and productive, and identify who, what, when, where, and why. So, were you working closely with other people or by yourself? What kind of work were you doing? Looking at the big picture and zeroing in, or starting from the details and moving out? What time of day does your best work happen? Some people are useless after or before a certain hour, but some people have waves of concentration that come and go. Where were you? Were you in a Zen-like office space, a coffee shop, or surrounded by plants, paint tubes, or puppies? It makes sense that if there is a way that you work best, then the right job should allow you to work in that way more often than not. Okay. Second part of the love what you do equation, that the right job needs to be challenging. तो अभी हम second part में आ गए. Love, do what you love से love what you do. So इसमें the right job needs to be challenging. At first blush, people often seem to prefer easy tasks. I didn't understand this. At first blush, people often seem to prefer easy tasks, but as Emma Bille tells me, most people get bored with easy jobs.
जैसे मैं
Ultimately,
इसका एक
you
बहुत
want
अच्छा एग्जांपल दे सकता हूँ, थोड़ा सा लिटिल बिट कॉन्फिडेंशियल टाइप से है. There is a friend who is at a very high position in government of India in Delhi, inside the parliament. वो कह रहे हैं मेरी जॉब इतनी सिक्योर जॉब है, मैं बोर हो गया हूँ, मुझे तो कुछ करना है, मुझे जॉब छोड़ना है, क्योंकि कोई चैलेंज नहीं है. राइट, दिस इज द राइट एग्जांपल. क्या करना है फिर? अप्लाइंग इन द यूएन
Okay.
for some high commissioner type of job because he is eligible for that. कह रहे ये
Right.
चैलेंज नहीं है. तो चैलेंज कितनी इंपॉर्टेंट चीज़ है. पूरी जॉब सिक्योरिटी है, सब कुछ है, एवरीथिंग इज देयर, लेकिन चैलेंजिंग नहीं है. तो ये हम समझ सकते हैं, और भी कोई कनेक्ट कर सकता है तो बता सकते हैं कि कितनी इंपॉर्टेंट बात है ये. हालांकि कोई पहले लोग क्या चाहते हैं भाई, इजी काम करना पड़े. शुरू में तो लोग ये सोचते हैं इजी काम करना पड़े, इजी मनी, लेकिन नो, नॉट एवरीबॉडी लाइक्स दैट.
शायद एटॉमिक हैबिट्स में और मिहालिका भी फ्लो में भी यही हमने अब तक समझते आए हैं ना. इट शुड
यस,
बी ऑप्टिमली चैलेंजिंग.
या इसे हम कहते हैं गोल्डीलॉक्स प्रिंसिपल, मतलब द मिडिल, नॉट वेरी इजी, नॉट वेरी टफ.
हम्म. Ultimately, you want work that's optimally challenging, where the work calls on your best skills and helps you develop new skills, but is not completely beyond your skill level. This is because such work puts you in a state that the psychologist Mihaly
किसी की
आ
बात कर
गया.
रहे थे.
हाँ, that the psychologist Mihaly terms flow. Decades ago, मैं फिर से पढ़ लेती हूँ सबके रेफरेंस के लिए. This is because such work puts you in a state that the psychologist Mihaly terms flow. Decades ago, in a now famous and widely chronicled experiment, Mihaly and his colleagues decided to figure out exactly when people were happiest. They gave thousands of people pagers that would go off randomly throughout the day and asked them to record what they were doing and how they felt, aside from being annoyed at the incessant buzzing. They found that people were happiest when they were completely absorbed in activities that were difficult but doable, to the point where their brains no longer had space to ruminate about the troubles of daily life. Time seemed to stop, and Mihaly wrote in his 1990 book, Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience. Hours pass by in minutes, and minutes can stretch out to seem like hours. When researchers interviewed people with considerable skills in certain areas, for instance, composers seated at the piano, figure skaters in the middle of intense practice. Such people spoke of feelings as though they were carried along by water. They were almost floating, hence flow. Such a state doesn't have to occur at work, but the structures and goals of work do provide ample opportunities for losing yourself in difficult but doable tasks. तो हमारा जरूरी नहीं है कि आप वर्क में हैं और ऐसा हो फ्लो स्टेट में, बट जो स्ट्रक्चर है और गोल आपका काम का है, दैट शुड एटलीस्ट अलाउ और प्रोवाइड यू एम्पल अपॉर्चुनिटी टू लेट योरसेल्फ लूज in difficult but doable task. So for all of you, you can also think over this. The question the author is asking, do you ever feel this way with your job? What are you working on when you do? And I mean, if you don't feel, so what are you working on when you do feel like that? When I have the skeleton of a chapter written and I'm going in and fleshing it out, I can start typing at 7:30 a.m. and not look up until 1:30 p.m. when I realize I'm starving for lunch. Pay attention to when you feel most absorbed at work. If you want to be blissful, your job should involve spending as much time as possible in that space where you're leveraging your core competencies and working in the way you choose on something demanding enough that, as Earl puts it in Sea Change, one discovery leads to another, each new scrap of information triggering awareness of dozens of new unknowns. If you're spending some time in this state, then you're probably at least close to the right line of work. The key question becomes how you can improve your ratio. What existing project could you scale up, or what new projects would make you excited to come to work in the morning? If you're not sure, schedule 30 minutes 2 to 3 times a week to think about this and to have conversations with your colleagues, your mentors, or anyone in your network who's thoughtful enough to get you unstuck. आप इसमें कुछ बोलना चाहते हैं राहुल भाई?
मैं तो ये कहूँगा कि अगर जैसे वो पूछ रहे थे कि आप ऐसा कब कब फील करते हो, तो आई वुड से एवरी डे इन एवरी सेशन ऑल द टाइम. तो इट मीन्स आई एम इन द राइट काइंड ऑफ जॉब. सिंपल.
और जो श्योर नहीं है तो उनके लिए
दे कैन थिंक अबाउट इट, दे कैन डिस्कस, जैसा वो कह रहे हैं. एटलीस्ट वो कन्वर्सेशन में बात आनी चाहिए, भले वो रीडिंग के थ्रू आए या कैसे भी आए.
Of course, if you rarely or never experience this bliss and absorption at work, or if you're in an organization that actively or passively thwarts your attempt to focus on the substance of your work, the third aspect of Amibel's 3 job conditions, then you have some hard thinking to do. If you never feel absorbed at work, are there other points in your life when you feel this way? What are you doing then? If you can't recall, start working your way through that list of 100 dreams. तो थोड़ी देर पहले हमने ये डिस्कस किया था कि लिस्ट आउट योर 100 ड्रीम्स and start with one of it. Do any of these activities challenge you? Do any of these activities challenge you and absorb you to the point where you don't notice the time? Does the stuff of these activities make you happy? मतलब nitty-gritties or whatever inner details of it. Does it make you happy? Write these down over the next 6 months. Start thinking about ways that you can incorporate them into your life's work, ways you can change your life's work, or ways you can find a more supportive work team or organization. I can't tell you what the answers to these questions are, but I can tell you not to dismiss this exercise as impractical. In the next section of this chapter, I want to convince you that it's far more practical to love your work than to be in the wrong job.
ओके, वंडरफुल. बहुत ही डेप्थ है, प्रोफाउंड है चैप्टर में, और काफ़ी इंपॉर्टेंट इसमें कीवर्ड्स पे भी हम ध्यान दें. जैसे अभी ये भी इसमें ऐड कर सकते हैं, ब्लिस एंड एब्सॉर्प्शन. 3 कीवर्ड्स हमारे पहले हो गए, टोटल 5 कीवर्ड्स, और 6 हम कह सकते हैं लिस्ट ऑफ 100 ड्रीम्स. तो कीवर्ड्स के थ्रू थोड़ा याद करना, कनेक्ट करना डॉट्स को ईजी रहता है. ठीक है जी. कोई कुछ इसमें कहना चाहते हैं, ऐड करना चाहते हैं तो क्विकली, अदरवाइज लेट अस गो टू फोकस सेशन.